So there's more news on the Resident Evil 4 remake. We got to see new gameplay footage, cutscenes, and a few more familiar faces return. And can I just say that this remake is taking the right steps? I think it's pretty obvious that Capcom is going for a much grittier and darker tone for Resident Evil 4 remake than the original. Not only are the aesthetics a lot more dark, but so is the approach of the story from at least what we can see so far. Now, I'm not gonna doubt that the remake will have campiness and those cringe moments that we all love and praise, but I just feel like there's going to be a lot more weight in the remake than the original, because in the original, everything is kind of ridiculous.
I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics too.
And in my opinion, if Capcom is going for this more serious approach, then I think it would definitely apply to Resident Evil 4's most memorable and notorious boss, Jack Krauser. There are many interesting ways to make Krauser a more interesting antagonist. In the original, he's just kind of a twat. His motivations were shallow, his character hadn't been really fleshed out, and all he really was a cool looking dude that fights Leon like twice. But even despite all those shortcomings, he was still a character we remembered. But what can the remake do to kind of make Krauser a bit more of an opposing force? One that can both challenge Leon in a physical duel, as well as his motivations, ethics, and past. Hear me out. This all ties back to the first trailer we ever got of the remake, where Leon recounts the incidents of Raccoon City.
If I could just forget what happened that night. The pain. Even for a second. This time, it can be different.
There's a lot of information that can be deciphered from that short clip, but I don't think that Leon is referring to Raccoon City in this case. I think he's actually referring to a separate incident that happens 4 years later after the Raccoon City infestation, a codename Operation Javier. Now, for the fine people who started the franchise after the Resident Evil 2 remake, which I personally call fake fans,
oh hell no, man, what the fuck?
Will probably have no idea what Operation Javier is. And I don't blame you, it's not the best that Resident Evil has to offer, but it does give an origin story of how Leon G. Kennedy and jacked as fuck Krauser met. To cut a very long story short, Leon and Krauser work together to bring down this man, but along the way they bump into this thing, which they successfully rescue after beating this thing. You get that? So they escape in a helicopter and live happily ever after. Or, alternatively, you could fuck around in a battle, waste time, and get the bad ending where this thing dies. But thankfully, this ending is considered non-canon. But you see, this is where my theory kind of comes into play. What if in the alternative timeline of the RE2 remake branch, this ending is actually the canon ending? This is to say that Manuela dies, Leon fails to save her, and Krauser is so fucked up from this incident that he goes insane in pursuit of more power, so that he never has to endure that kind of pain ever again. It's kinda basic, but it's definitely a lot better than the original where Krauser becomes a parasite mutant because he lost his arm and was unable to return to military service. And the weird thing is, if you take a look back at this scene,
This time, it can be different. It has to.
he says, this time it can be different. Now he can't be referring to Ada in the scene because he's saying this with a picture of Ashley in front of him, a rescue target. Ada was more than capable of handling herself, she just got unlucky several times, but she's still alive. And in both the original Resident Evil 4 and it appears in the remake, Leon knows that Ada's fine. This is most likely to shoehorn Albert Wesker in some time in the future for the Resident Evil franchise. But when Leon is saying this time it can be different, it only makes sense to assume that Leon is actually talking about Manuela and how he was unable to protect her. So, spoiler alert, Manuela does not show up in the rest of the Resident Evil franchise, at least not to my knowledge. So why then would you keep a character if 1, they don't contribute to the plot, 2, they don't act as pivotal points in our character's journey, or 3, are like never brought up ever again? Like, what is the point of a character like that? So in a narrative sense, it would be kind of poggers if Manuela died, because this would bring the tension between Leon and Krauser to be at an absolute high, and actually give them a reason to stop being buddies, because in Operation Javier, those two were buddies. There were probably more than that, but we don't talk about that. So why would Krauser just turn on Leon for nothing? You know, does he want power? I don't know, that sounds kind of basic. Would it make more sense if Krauser turns on Leon because of his past and most importantly painful experiences that they both shared, and you know, they could kind of blame each other for this traumatic incident, and there could be this element of personal clash between the two? This could honestly make Krauser a much more interesting boss to fight because of, you know, these elements of familiarity, hypocrisy, and being two sides of the same coin. So what's the conclusion? So basically, in conclusion, I think that in the remake, it follows a completely different timeline from the original. Shit hits the fan in this different timeline. This thing dies. Krauser doesn't do a YouTube apology, instead goes corrupt, and then
betrayal, betrayal, betrayal.
Operation Javier and whatever happens in it will serve as essential backstory, obviously between Krauser and Leon, but also the entire narrative as a whole. You know, saving Ashley, Leon becoming a secret agent, his seemingly depressed tone that we see in the trailers, and above all, a much needed character arc for our boy Leon. We also give this boy another chance to shine in the spotlight, as I do think that Krauser is the most important character in Resident Evil 4 aside from Leon and
Bitch in the red dress.
And I think he should get some screen time, and this is probably the best way to approach the remake. Yeah, that's it.
Say a fire starting in my heart, reaching that fever pitch, bugging out the